As Amy said, I'm Shelley Baeslack. I am one of the OSU Lake County Master Gardener volunteers, and I'm here to tell you about continuous color using perennials today. This is the Extension Office. We deal with family and consumer sciences, 4-H and youth development, community development, and agriculture and natural resources. One of the last ones is the Sea Grant program, which has to do with Lake Erie. It's on South Bass Island, and it's a research station out of OSU. If you get a chance to go up there, go up there. It's extremely interesting. You can reach us at 99 East Erie Street in Paynesville, and the phone number is 440-350-2582, or if you're internet savvy, lake.osu.edu. I'm going to talk, as I said, about continuous color using perennials. And these 4 pictures here are the same garden in 4 different seasons. So you can see in the spring there's a lot of color, in summer it's a little more subdued. In the fall, you get more color through the foliage, and in the winter, you can see there are bones and basics to the garden that still you can look out and see things that are pretty. The first thing you have to do is make a plan. Draw a rough sketch of your garden area, mark your shrubs, mark your trees, any existing plants that you can remember that you've put in. If you're like me, you'll be digging a spot and put a plant in right over another plant, so it's good to mark them. Any walls you have, or anything else, the side of a house, just these things are important when you're planning. Then you have to evaluate the site. Things like, how large an area do you have? Have you had a soil test recently? Are there any existing structures, such as the house or a garage? A water source. How much maintenance do you want? What type of light do you have in your area? What type moisture? And are you protected or windy? As you'll see, my house can be extremely windy. This is the area. Do you have a small protected area there? That house was in Columbus, and that was my incubator garden there. Or do you have a big, vast, roaming area? That picture is at Warwick Castle in England, and that's a friend of mine walking through a rose garden. How about a soil test? Have any of you ever had a soil test done? No? You won. Okay, good. One victim back there. But it's something that should be done probably every 5 years. I'd have a soil test done. You can get a soil test a couple different ways. You can go to our website and follow the link to a soil test. You click on the Master Gardening Volunteer Program, click on Soil Testing, Penn State, or you could come into the office and purchase a kit for $10. You follow the instructions, and one of the things they will have you do is collect your soil. You collect it from different areas of your garden, a cup each time, put it in a bag, mix it up, and then you send a cup back to the address that they give you. You send it in, you wait for an answer, and you can call the office, and Tom, our extension educator, will explain the answer to you if you need it. Or you can come in, call first, make sure he's in the office, and come in and he'll explain it to you. What type existing structure do you have? You could have a house, you could have a tree, you could have fences. You need to think about that because they cast shadows. Do you have a water source handy and nearby? One should be close at hand and easily accessible. I'm going to guarantee that you're not going to be wanting to carry buckets of water or watering cans from your front yard back to your backyard. It's not going to happen. If you don't have a water source, plant something that's good for dry. Maintenance. How much work do you want to put in to what you're doing? Do you like the prima donna plants? That rose tree will take a lot of care. Or do you want something like those daylilies that are happy-go-lucky? It's up to you, but just remember when you buy the plant, look and see what's needed. because if you get a prima donna, you can't treat it like a daylily. Light. How much light do you have in your yard? In my whole yard, I have all of it. I have the full sun 8 hours a day in the front. I have part sun and part shade. I have shade and I have deep shade. My house is on the water, and nowadays they're building the lakefront homes close together, like you'd see in California, because of lakefront property being what it is, and there's only so much to go around, so they squeeze the houses in. So between my neighbor and I, we have about 12 feet, and that is deep shade, and it's a wind tunnel. How much moisture do you have? There's one area of standing water there, and something different would go in that than in this terraced section, which will be dry. Or you can have a nice section which will be pretty easy to deal with. That's on the bottom of a walkout. So I don't really have to water much where those astilbe are, because the water runs downhill, and I think during our drought the other year, I only had to water once or twice in that area. Wind movement. Do you have a lot, like the lake shows there, or do you have a little, like behind that wall? Believe it or not, I get what they call environmental damage on my plants from the wind. It actually looks, it's been dried out, and it actually is dead around the outside of the leaves from the wind sometimes. What type of a garden do you want to install? Do you want a butterfly garden, a cutting garden, a flower garden, a garden for kids, pollinator garden, privacy? If you have some of those nosy neighbors, do you want a privacy garden? Or how about a veggie garden? Have you ever thought about sticking veggies or fruits in with your flowers? That can be done. This talk is on perennials. And a perennial will last 3 or more years if it is hardy in your zone. Remember, in other zones, our annuals are perennials there. Like if you have a geranium here, it's not going to last you. But out in California, I've seen geraniums this high. I mean, it just depends where you are. And my sister, who lives in Southern California, can't just put tulips and daffodils in the ground and leave them there. She has to dig them out and put them in her refrigerator if she wants them to come back. A biennial will last you 2 years, but it may reseed itself and let you think that it's a perennial. For example, a hollyhock. Your garden can include flowers, bulbs, woody, shrubs, trees, and biennials to give you continuous color throughout the seasons. And again, perennials in other zones are annuals here. Now, you should be getting your soil test results back. Again, you can bring it in to us, and it can be read, or you can call Tom. You most likely will have to amend your soil with something. And I suppose you know that you can tweak your soil's pH to change the color on some plants. Those are hydrangeas. They're a mophead variety, and they all come from my backyard, and it just depends how much aluminum sulfate I've put around the plant as to what color you're going to get. Now the fun time. Let's go pick your plants out at your local garden center. First, you have to know your zone. You have to know what the temperature is here, because if you pick a plant that's not good for your zone, it's going to die. It's been said that Ohio has changed. The last 3 winters were quite warm and spring came early. That's not the case this year. Most of Ohio is now listed at 6A, and some scattered spots are 5B. However, to stay on the safe side, stay at 5B, or you could be replacing those plants. Enough time hasn't gone by yet to be safe. And we do get those occasional really cold winters. Do you have a pet? Make sure the plants you pick out are safe for them. Some plants are toxic to our pets. And to get a complete list of those plants, go to the ASPCA website. It's aspca.org. And then you can follow links out there. But onions are poisonous to dogs, so you don't want them, anything in the onion family, you don't want them going after. Lilies, you don't want them digging up your bulbs. I belong to a dachshund group online, and there was a picture of this dachshund digging up its bulbs, the bulbs in its owner's garden, and she said, did anybody else have this problem? And I wrote back, don't let them do that. Do these things ever frequent your yard? Then you need to make sure you buy plants that are deer resistant. No plant is deer proof. If a deer is hungry, it will eat anything. So get deer resistant and you'll have better luck. Check the label or the tag that comes with your plant. There is a wealth of information on that tag. It will tell you the planting zone. It will tell you whether your plant likes sun or shade. It will tell you how much to water your plant usually. It will tell you, this one tells you how to plant your plant. So check that out. I know some people that keep these in the old type photo albums, and then they can just go back and reference them. I like to go online and check it out, because I'm kind of a minimalist in some ways, but not when it comes to my garden. But so those are very important. Now, what do you look for? Plants that have as many interest in as many seasons as possible. Check out their blooms. When do they bloom? Check out their foliage. Some foliage is a blue-green, some is a lime green. Check that out and see what's going on there. Check out the fruit. I have a crabapple tree in my front yard that held its little crab apples all winter long, and that was kind of neat. And how about the bark? I've seen trees that have bark that look like camouflage. I've seen trees that have peeling bark. There are trees whose bark looks like roadways. Everything is interesting. So pay attention to that when you're picking out your plants and get what you like, get what you want to look at. The following slides are going to be broken up by the time the plant begins to bloom. And some may bloom 3 to 4 weeks, and they'll overlap into your next season. But many, if you deadhead them, will continue to bloom, because by deadheading, you're fooling the plant thinking, and you make it think, oh, I haven't reproduced. I've got to send another flower up, and I've got to get my seeds out. So remember to deadhead. One of the first flowers to come up is a Helleborus or a Lenten Rose. Usually this time of year, mine are up. Mine are up. Are they? Well, mine is in my deep, yeah, and I live right on the water, so I'm colder, but the poor things, they're just starting to stick their little heads up. Brunera, it's beautiful and frilly and floaty, and that's a good shade plant. A Grape Hyacinth, my leaves are out of the ground. I don't see any flowers starting to come up, but it's getting there. Grecian windflowers, I love those because they're so colorful. A snowdrop, those will usually come up before the snow is off the ground. And that's an early spring combination for you. Now in mid-spring, your bleeding hearts will come out. It used to be bleeding hearts would come up, do their thing, and then they'd die back. Well, now they've come out with a bleeding heart that will stay blooming most of the way through the summer. I think mine finally decides to stop blooming about mid-July. Creeping phlox. I love to see creeping phlox at full bloom in the spring, hanging over a wall, or it's a good ground cover. And it also, the foliage is a evergreen. So it looks nice the rest of the summer. And it'll get a little burned out in the winter, but it comes back in the spring. Daffodils, you can get daffodils that will come up early in the spring till early summer. And so you can have a good show of daffodils. Hyacinths, who doesn't love the smell of a hyacinth? Tulips, only plant these if you want to attract the deer to your yard because they are a lunch buffet. I have been able to deter the deer using powdered coyote urine. I don't like the stuff you spray on because it gets all over you, and then after it rains it washes off and you have to reapply. If you go onto Amazon and type in dried coyote urine, it will come up with several products, and they tend to last for about 4 weeks, even through rain. So I prefer that because you're not always out there spraying. And this is a mid-spring combination. This here is a peony tree when it was young. It's now probably this tall. It's as tall as it's going to get. But I had about 35 blooms on it last year. Now in late spring, you can do allium. Has anybody ever had allium in their yard? I love those things. I think they're great. They will, when their leaves dry and all the flower petals have fallen off, you can harvest the seed heads, and you can spray paint them. And my granddaughter and I did that one year for 4th of July. They looked like fireworks because they're not just the big round ones. They have them like this, which are more airy looking, and they come in all shapes and sizes. But please, don't spray paint them and let them stay in your garden. I saw that in Columbus one year driving by, and it wasn't pretty. Iris are a good thing to grow for this time of year, except they take up a lot of real estate and they only are showy once in Cleveland. I brought these from my house in Columbus, and back there you can get them to bloom twice. They're reblooming iris. They won't rebloom for me here because there isn't enough length of time, but in Columbus they rebloom. I gave some to my daughter who lives in our old house, and hers are still reblooming. It's not fair. Lilac, there's Miss Kim, and then there's your standard lilac bush. That's a baby one there. They do their first, they bloom in the spring, but now they do have a reblooming type of lilac. It's a shrub like the Miss Kim is, and it will rebloom throughout the summer. Not as prolifically as the Miss Kim does, in its full first bloom, but you'll get blooms on it throughout the summer. The same is true for an azalea. They have a reblooming type of azalea now. Peonies, this is that pink peony tree, and they bloom about the same time as the normal peony bush, maybe a week or two ahead of time. But the peony tree will give you bones in your garden, so when you look out, you're not just seeing a flat bed with nothing there. Poppies are a good thing to plant. Or Weigelia. I love a Weigelia bush in full bloom. And there again, I have one in my front yard now that will rebloom a little bit throughout the summer. And here's a late spring combination. Now in early summer, this is when the astilbes start blooming, and they'll have a lot of color. Well, you can get multicolored astilbe. And then the color will fade as they age, but still leave the seed heads on, and it'll be interesting. Coral bells. I love the coral bells because if we have a mild winter, they stay looking not quite that nice, but they stay looking nice all winter long. However, if it's a hard winter, they don't stay looking quite that nice. Coneflowers, there are so many different varieties and colors of coneflowers now. It's not just the old pink ones. And if you, after they're done with their first bloom, if you deadhead them, they too will want to rebloom. Catmint, this plant works its little heart out for you. Now take note, it is a mint, so it will do what every other mint does and try to spread. You do have to work a little harder at keeping it contained, but if you cut it off after it's done with its first bloom, it comes back up looking just like it did the first time around. Hydrangea. Now, once they start to bloom, the hydrangea will be colorful all season. These are the mop heads, most of them. There's one lace cap there. And the mop heads, you never know, unless you read your ticket that comes in your plant, whether you're getting an old type or a new type. They should tell you on that ticket. If you don't know, if you have one in your yard, the way to tell is if there's a bad winter and it dies back to the ground and comes up. If you don't have blooms, that's the old variety. If you get blooms that summer, it's the new variety. The old variety will only bloom on old wood. The new variety will bloom on old wood and new growth. And when you're pruning these, don't slash them off at the top. My father-in-law would come around and he'd go to my sister-in-law's house and he'd take his what do they call? I'm not good with tools. Hedge trimmer, and just go with that electric thing. And and then my poor sister-in-law couldn't figure out why her hydrangeas weren't blooming. But when you want to trim them, follow especially if you're trying to do it for height and you want to make it shorter, find that tall bloom, follow it down to the base of the plant and cut it off at the base. If you do that, a third of the plant a year, by the time the third year rolls around, you'll have a whole new bush. You will have rejuvenated your bush. In the midsummer, have any of you ever seen the California lily of the Nile? It's also called agapanthus. When I first saw it, I was out at my sister's house in Southern California, and I thought, oh, that's a weird alien. But no, it's not. It's a lily. And with this one, I pushed the envelope. Where that plant is in a very warm, secluded section of the house. It gets a lot of sun, and it's got concrete, so it stays warmer. So, if we had a really cold winter, it'll die off. But if it's protected like that, you can get it to come back the next year. Balloon flowers are great. They start blooming in July. And with deadheading, I have had my balloon flowers bloom through August for me. So just make sure you get out there and you pop the spent blooms off. The blazing star, Liatris, are colorful, and they're a bulb, and they come up and they bloom from the bottom up, and they're great. A butterfly bush. I love butterfly bushes. They do not like wet feet, so do not plant them in too much water. But I just had a question. I also do Ask a Master Gardener online, and I had a question, is the butterfly bush invasive? Now, you hear those rumors, and they're not invasive in our area. I don't think they're invasive anywhere in Ohio. I did a lot of research on this question this afternoon, and I could not find anything about them being invasive in Ohio. Oregon, however, has banned them because their climate must be different enough. And also, when I was in the UK a couple years ago, we did a lot on the trains. And these butterfly bushes are all over the train tracks. And they were growing like a weed. So their winters are mild enough that they are invasive over there. But here we have nothing to worry about. And the butterflies love them and they attract them. And if you plant some milkweed nearby, it will be helping the pollinators. Hardy crepe myrtle. They are hardy in our area. Even after that last really, really hard winter that we had, was it 12 or 13 when it was so cold for so long? I thought mine had died out, so I replaced it with some vanilla strawberry hydrangea. And lo and behold, about the beginning of June, this sprout came up from the root. It had not died off. Hibiscus, your hardy hibiscus, they now have two types, the type that grows tall like you're used to seeing, and they also have a bush type out now. Those are the very last thing in the spring to push through the ground. You will think they are dead. Hostas, now the deer like hostas, but their foliage comes in such a variety of colors and bloom times that they're worth putting in and trying. And there are some that like sun, but mostly they're a shade plant. Phlox come in all sorts of colors and sizes now, but just be careful when you plant your phlox that you don't plant them too close together because they can get powdery mildew. You want to have enough movement of the wind through them so that they don't. And remember, when you are watering, make sure you water to the base of the plant, not down. Rogerza, this is one that when I first saw it, I did not know what it was. It's a shade lover, and it is related to the astilbe, except it gets about as tall as I am. Sea holly is another fascinating plant that most people don't have in their yard. It likes sun, and it gets to be this beautiful steel blue. It's almost like some of the leaves just turn steel blue and a seed head comes up. Yarrow, if you deadhead yarrow, it will bloom again. So deadhead that yarrow. And this is a midsummer combination. In the late summer, there's aster, which is a relative to the mum plant. And if you pinch it back till the 4th of July, like you do your mums, you will control the height and it won't get leggy and fall over. Monkshoes, I won't have this in my yard because it is poisonous, but it is good fall color. Mums, they are not an annual, contrary to what the garden centers want you to believe. If you plant the mum correctly, it will come back the following year. Sedum, there's one called Autumn Joy Sedum, which gives you the fall color. This is not. I call this one Mary's Sedum because my friend Mary in New York gave it to me. I have no idea what type sedum it really is, what variety, but isn't that what perennials are all about? Dividing them and giving them to your friends, and then you can remember your friend when they give you one. And this is a late summer combination. Now in the fall, have any of you ever seen the turtle heads? I love those. That foliage is a blue-green. And it's gorgeous with that magenta flower. That's a hot lips variety of turtle heads, and they bloom from the bottom up also. A toad lily, it's nowhere near as big as that. It is a little itty bitty flower. It's a shade lover, but it gives you some color in the fall. I know an ornamental cabbage is not a perennial, but it will last through the winter and you'll see it peeking out of the snow and it'll give you something to look at. How about planting a sugar maple? You get lovely color in the fall and there is structure to that. And here are some fall combinations. The October one was in my front yard several years ago and you can see roses still blooming. there. And then in November, that's my daughter's house in Westerville, and she actually still has a rose blooming, and her burning bush is gorgeous. Try planting Oriental and Asian lilies. The varieties can start blooming in the late spring, and they bloom through, there are some that bloom to in midsummer. And they will add color, and they will come back up, and they will divide, and you will have more of them.
How about deer?
Deer will eat the bloom, but they will not eat the bulb. Daylilies, deer like daylily too. Daylilies are actually edible for people if you want to put one on your salad. I've never tried it, but it can be done. And daylilies are not your Stella d'Oro anymore. They have types that you can get early to very late. They now have rebloomers in all sorts of different colors, not just yellow. And if you plant your daylilies near your spring bulbs, the daylily foliage comes up and covers the dying foliage of your spring bulbs. I don't know how many daylilies I've divided, and people have said, oh, do you know you gave me a daffodil with that? Pansies. Now, these are an annual, but I planted that pansy in 2009, and it still volunteers in my garden, and it surprises me where it's going to come up. So they will give you early color if you want to put some in, and they surprise you. Roses. Try the knockout roses. They're low maintenance. You don't have to worry too much about them. Or Sub-Zero are good for our zone because they will go down to zone 4. And we don't get that cold that often, but occasionally we do. Try shrubs. Azaleas, like I said, are now reblooming. Blueberries, I have a blueberry bush in a container and also in my flower bed. The one in the container I just drag into the garage and dump a little water on it every so often in the winter, and it does fine. How about a butterfly bush? Or that's red twig dogwood. Holly, you will get the green and the red berries. And lilacs are now rebloomers too. Or how about a flowering tree? A weeping cherry or a crabapple, a crepe myrtle or a redbud or a tulip tree. You'll get flower and structure from all that. Grasses. There are many lovely ornamental grasses for sun and shade. The one pictured is the fountain grass Carly Rose. There's hardy pampas grass, there's blue lime grass, blue fescue, and perennial fountain grass. This is a list of helpful websites, and I do have a handout that has a list of different times, like I had divided up there for different flowers that bloom. Thank you for having me. I hope you learned something and had an enjoyable time. I did. Okay, thank you.